There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here by the grace of God. I want to talk to you today about recognizing church leaders that are emerging. They're emerging as leaders because they're speaking out. I'm bringing you this broadcast on Sunday, August 9th. Last night, the 8th, Saturday night, evangelist Sean Fawcett, F-A-U-C-H-T, held a revival in Portland, Oregon. Tonight he'll be in Spokane, Washington. He referenced it, entitled it, Riots to Revival. The estimate of people that were in attendance last night was 400 to 700,000 people. This evangelist had previously held beach meetings in California where they were technically illegal, but he was never arrested. He's continuing his stand as referenced above. He had music, he had baptism in the river nearby. It was so good, I was so impressed. It was on Fox News at 8:30 Eastern Time where they interviewed him. I'm leaving you a link below so you can get more information. Tremendous stand. Tremendous stand. Now I want to talk to you about another man that's been standing up for quite some time. He said, "I will go to jail before I close my church." Wow, I wish we had more men like that in the pulpit. I really do. Cities and communities across the country have been damaged and they've been destroyed as some protests have turned into riots. When it comes to the virus and stopping the spread, it's become apparent that riots and protesting are acceptable, but attending church is too dangerous. We'd be sure to get the plague if we go there. Now, church leaders in California say they're willing to risk everything, even if that means going to jail. The Washington Examiner reports, when California Governor Newsom in July announced revamped restrictions on worship, churches statewide resisted, drawing the attention of pastors nationwide as they prepare for a renewed struggle over church closures. Newsom is in his restrictions requiring all churches to suspend singing during services and most to have to hold their services outside. Citing already burdensome restrictions placed on them in the spring, many church leaders refused to comply. Well, the one that gave that quote above? John MacArthur, a celebrity pastor who declared in a recent Sunday service, quote, "Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church," end quote. MacArthur's sermon won widespread approval with many evangelicals. Greg Locke, a Tennessee pastor with a large social media following, in a video this past week, cited MacArthur to make clear to his own congregation that he has no plans to close again if shutdowns return to Tennessee. Churches should be open, Locke said. There should be no excuses. I'll go to jail before I close my church. Locke added that his church, Global Vision Baptist Church, which restricted previous pleas in March from the governor, when they asked him to close, he pointed out that they were not even social distancing. They weren't wearing masks from any of their members. Locke said in a statement that his decision arose from a refusal to live in constant fear and media hysteria. A series of churches in California sued Newsom after he banned indoor services. Others have outright ignored the orders, holding demonstrations to protest alleged attacks on religious liberty. Some counties, such as San Diego, have retaliated by promising to crack down on churches that violate Newsom's orders. The legal battle for churches' ability to remain open has developed significantly since March, when nearly every state required churches to shut down or severely restrict the number of people at in-person services. The first few churches that were sued on the grounds that they should be allowed to hold drive-in services. The next round focused on in-person services. Several interventions from the Justice Department and President Trump emboldened the churches in their cause. Thank you, Mr. President. 2 churches, one in California and one in Nevada, appealed to the Supreme Court for an emergency injunction exempting them from the restrictions. Both were rejected, sadly. A third church from Illinois planned to send its case to the court in early August. Religious liberty advocates expect a more favorable outcome. More recently, churches have cited a so-called double standard in the way the governors treat worship in the pews compared with how they treat protests in the street. In New Jersey, the last state to remove the virus restrictions, 3 churches in a lawsuit accused Governor Phil Murphy of favoring the cause of racial justice over that of religious exercise. The whole scheme is preposterous, wrote Christopher Ferrara. That's the attorney for the churches. He noted that America has never seen anything like it. Murphy is making up rules as he goes. Ferrara also criticized the governor for a mask mandate, which he said impeded the practice of worship. Another report. I've heard of this good man before, and it's another report on the same one just referenced, Pastor John MacArthur. Did you know that he's been threatened with arrest and $1,000 a day fines? That's right, the city of Los Angeles, through a cease and desist letter, has threatened Grace Community Church and Pastor John MacArthur with a daily fine of $1,000 or arrest. The church is under attack after they decided to defy orders not to hold indoor worship service and not to sing. Todd Stardens, who brought me this article, predicted attacks on evangelical churches in his explosive book, Culture Jihad, How to Stop the Left from Killing a Nation. In response to the Democrats who control Los Angeles, the nationally known pastors acquired the legal services of the Thomas More Society. Jenna Ellis, the senior legal advisor of the Trump 2020 presidential campaign, and herself a constitutional law attorney, and a constitutional law attorney Charles Lamandry, will head up the church's legal team. Grace Community Church has every right to assemble without impossible and unreasonable infringement from the state, and the state has absolutely no power to impose the restrictions it is demanding, Ellis said. Church is essential, and the government has no power to arbitrate whether religious organizations are essential or not. This is not about health and safety. It's about targeting churches, noted. In closing on the subject, I'd like to bring you a small portion of a quote from Pastor David Langford, who is also an evangelist. He puts out this daily newsletter. I've known him for many years, a good personal friend. He noted, and I quote, "We are living in unprecedented times. State governors are banning the assembling of churches. In California, congregations can be no larger than 100 in attendance, and singing isn't even allowed. Surely we are living in the last of the last days as we watch the hatred that protesters spew at those who pray publicly and at times just try to enter their houses of worship peacefully." Jesus warned his disciples that this day would come. We read of it in John 15:18 through 20, and I quote, "If the world hate you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love his own. But because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my sayings, they will keep yours also." In this particular passage of Scripture, Christ is warning the disciples of the devastating persecution that will come upon the earth, his body, in the end times. Ask yourself this question: am I prepared to be hated because of my commitment to Jesus Christ? The day may come when each of us will be forced to answer this harrowing question. And folks, I just ask you in closing, are you doing enough for the cause of Christ that anybody will even criticize you? Even as a layman, as a believer, we have a responsibility to take a stand at every given opportunity. And certainly our pastors have an obligation to take that stand. I'm so encouraged this weekend on hearing what I heard take place on the West Coast last night and promised for again tonight. I heard the man speak on Fox. I hope you follow up and at least listen to him. A couple of things I need to add here, just a bit of good news I want to put on. I want to share it with you. On August surprise, the latest poll shows that the president's approval rating surged to 51% in August 3rd to be exact. A new poll from Rasmussen shows President Trump's approval rating popping up to 51% as the country struggles to crack down on anti-police protests and contain the deadly coronavirus pandemic. In the face of a handful of polls in recent weeks showing President Donald Trump as the underdog against Joe Biden, momentum is beginning to turn around. That's a report from Bongino.com. After having him trailing Biden by double digits in early July, a week ago, Rasmussen report had the race as basically even, with Biden leading 47-45, which is within the margin of error. And I want to just say a word here. Rasmussen is the best poll. That's the one you can believe. That's the one they won. They were the one that called it the closest in 16, but there's a reason for it. And that is the type of polling they do. It's more objective. It's not slanted, and it's not packed with Democrats. Keep it in mind when you read the results of the polls. Now, another thing, I just want to do a bit of a follow-up from last week. There's a recent poll out that shows that 42% of Americans say they will submit to the coronavirus vaccine. Only 42%. That's right. A new Yahoo News YouGov poll has found that just 42% of Americans say they plan to get a coronavirus vaccine when it becomes available. We covered this in extension, quite a bit of extensiveness last week. The figure represents an all-time low for those that would go along with the program. It fell from a recent 55%, that was in early May, 50% in late May, 46% in July. Now, on August 6th, 42%. I guess more Americans are hearing what we were talking about last week. When asked if and when a coronavirus becomes available, will you get vaccinated? That was what they were asked. Fewer Americans across the political spectrum answered in the affirmative. Only a majority of Democrats now plan to get vaccinated, with 55% saying they'll still take the jab. Among Republicans, 37% say they're willing to get vaccinated, and fewer even independents, 34% willing to take it. Pass the word around, folks. Pass the word around. And encourage your pastor friend, the acquaintance that you have, the stands that you take, to stand in these final hours against what we've been told would be our fate in the last days. And now a closing word from our sponsor. No finer log homes than Lincoln Logs. They're available to you at great pricing. I am CEO of Lincoln Logs. I will work with you personally, give you answers to your questions, give you a quote on our fine product. My toll-free number, 800-848-3310. There's never a cost, never an obligation for a quote from Lincoln Logs. I am there to serve you and hope to be available when you call. If not, leave the number for a fast response. Remember, Lincoln Log Homes, we've been in business over 45 years, a member of the Charlotte Better Business Bureau.